It is possible. Definitely good question. ARM, Terraform, PowerShell, whatever it is possible to do all these things. So creating a virtual network storage account, integrating everything. We'll also look at that. So yes, it is possible via automation as well. You can do the same thing via automation. And once if I go into the resource, and again the same thing, standard locally redundant storage v2 and all these things out. But let me scroll down into something called networking. And you see now it is not open for public access. Rather, it is integrated with something called what? A demo vnet, which is my virtual network out here, which means that if I'm a user going from the internet, now I can create a container, not a problem. I can say test container and say create this out. I can create a container, not an issue. But if I want to go inside the container, upload some data and etc., now I get this issue telling that this request is not authorized to perform because your storage account has a virtual network which is protecting it from the internet traffic out here. So you cannot directly go ahead and start interacting with this particular storage account. And this is done to enhance the security of your organization. Very, very importantly, the storage account has to be a secured storage account out here. Yes, any questions still here? Any questions that I can take till here?
If you are creating storage account with virtual network, and
Mhm.
how our clients will able to open the access? For
How our
example,
client will be yes, how our client will be able to open the access? Again, very good question out here. Is that how will a particular user will be able to, let's say, access this particular storage account out here? Is that multiple techniques, either through something known as a VPN, virtual private network, something called as a VPN. Now, if you work in an organization, the first thing that you do is that open that particular VPN software, connect to the VPN software, and then let's say connect to that particular storage account in a secure way. Or in a later class, in a later concept, I will introduce something known as a virtual machine, which I will go ahead and create it in the same subnet as my storage account is. And this virtual machine can have a login and a password, which I'll only share it with my client. And my client can go inside this particular virtual machine and then connect to my storage account from this particular virtual machine out here. So multiple ways of going ahead and connecting to that particular storage account. It just depends upon what kind of a security you're trying to enforce out here. Either a
Uh,
VPN or a virtual machine protection. Yes, go ahead, please.
yes, just one question. I mean, if the storage account is in, I mean, right now it is assigned to all the subnets. So any of the VM in any of the subnets will be able to access, right? I mean,
Not really.
that does need
The store,
extra
no,
settings
not
need.
really. Not really. If you look at the storage account right now, it's only having access from one particular subnet. There's only one
Yes, yes,
subnet that has
demo
access.
will. Yes.
No, it is no. The thing here is that there are two things out here. Demo VNet is a virtual network. Subnet
Okay,
one is the
okay,
subnet that has access to your storage account,
okay.
which is this one.
Mhm. Okay.
So
So for now, only
this
subnet
is
one will subnet. Sorry,
yes,
sorry. For now, only subnet one VM machines will be able to access.
correct. Only the virtual
Yeah.
machines that are there in subnet one will be able to access your storage accounts out here.
Okay.
Yes, someone had offline question yesterday. Can I create multiple storage accounts? Can you come again, please, with your question? Hmm. Please come with your question back again. See, they are talking about two different things out here. You're telling, can I create multiple storage accounts in a virtual machine? Virtual machine is different. Storage account is different. Virtual network. You can create 65,000 storage accounts in this particular virtual network. You can do that, provided your storage accounts are in the same region as your virtual network is. You can do that. As far as that is satisfied, you can do that. Yes, so you'll have to be a little careful using these terms because each and everything indicates something else. Virtual networks, subnets, virtual machines is a different one altogether.
Hi, Kiran.
Just a second, I'm taking a question offline. I'll come back. Yes. Can you come again, please? One storage account is there, okay? Not really. One subnet can have how many? 251 addresses. Technically, you can have 251 storage accounts sitting inside a particular subnet. It is not that one storage account and one subnet. No. If I do that, then I'll end up wasting a lot of subnets out there. So one storage account or one subnet can have 251 storage accounts integrated with it. Yes, someone, because one subnet, let's say I delegate it, meaning there's something known as subnet delegation concept, which will come later. Meaning I tell that one subnet can only hold storage accounts. The other subnet can only hold virtual machines. The third subnet can only hold web applications and etc. And I can implement the firewall policies accordingly. Meaning, if it's a storage account, maybe I don't want I don't want the traffic coming from internet. If it's a web application, maybe I want the traffic coming from internet. I can now control what can come inside your network, what can go outside your network out there, and that is possible if I do some isolation out here. If I divide my networks out there. Yes,
Hi
someone
Kiran.
online had a question. Go ahead, please.
Hi. We created subnetworks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we have any chance to recreate that, and we have to change. Like you
Okay.
given 24 and 16 subnetworks.
Mm-hmm.
Then uh, we can. Is there any chance to change it to 16 to 24?
If
On,
you do not have, meaning if you're going to the virtual network out here, let's go into the virtual network and let's go into the address spaces out here. If I want to change this out right now, I cannot change this out because I already have a lot of subnets. I already have created a lot of subnets, integrated a lot of things out here, and etc. You cannot change the address space if you already have subnets. Meaning you can only change this address space while you are creating that particular virtual network out here.
oh,
So let me come back and I use a class A network in a subnet. I want to use class C. Firstly, very important question out here is that if you want to use a class C, then you need to have another address space out here telling it's a class C. You cannot use a class C for a subnet with a virtual network that is in a class A. They don't match each other. If you want to again do a class C, you will need to add another address space to your, let's say, virtual network out here, save it out, and then go ahead create a subnet under this particular space. You cannot do that directly. So if you want to, let's say, use a class C in a class A, not possible bluntly. But if you want to do that hellbent, then you can go ahead add one more address out there, and then you can go ahead and, let's say, create a class C network out there. Once I place a storage account in a VNet, can I not access it going through the VNet even if I have? Going through the VNet is different. If you go through the VNet, yes, you can have access to this because you need to have access. The intention here or the idea here is that someone can access your storage account or let's say as long as they are coming through the right channel, as long as they are coming through the virtual network out here. Yes, any more questions? Someone offline had a question. Anyone, any questions here?
Then one more question.
Good.
For example, my client need 300 storage accounts
Okay.
and one subnet is having 251 accounts access.
Mm-hmm.
So remaining accounts, can I use the other subnet or what will be the solution?
Definitely, you can use another subnet as well. If the amount of
Okay.
storage accounts are not fitting inside the first subnet out here, you can go ahead and integrate that particular storage account with a different subnet as such.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, according to the number of storage accounts that you'll have in your architecture, you'll go ahead and let's say isolate it in that way.
Hi, Kiran.
Good, please.
You have created one subnet in that
Hmm.
five Azure five addresses automatically resolved. Na? What purpose they
Correct.
resolved?
As I said, there is something known as communication broadcasting, meaning your subnet has to transfer data packets. When I say data packets out here, when I, as a user, communicate with your Azure account, I communicate with your virtual network. I send some information. The information that I send are in the form of something called as data packets in small bytes and all these things out. The addresses that are there inside your subnet or the addresses that are there inside your virtual network need to transfer this to your subnet, and then the subnet needs to transfer it to your storage account and all these things. So the communication is established in that way. All this is called as communication broadcasting. So you need one address for communication broadcasting, one address for the range itself, meaning I'm doing a 10.0.0.4. This is occupied by a storage account as such, so the second address goes for this one. The other three are for future purposes. That's what, let's say, the documentation also tells you, is that in case in the future, if I want, or if Microsoft wants to roll out some kind of an update, they would need a subnet space, and that's the reason they reserve this out. So by default, you cannot change that, you cannot reduce it, you cannot increase it. It's by default. You will lose 5 addresses whenever you go ahead and create a subnet out there. No matter how big or how small that subnet is, Microsoft will take out 5 addresses out there from that particular subnet as such. Does that answer your question? Yes, that's the
Yeah.
reason that I just said, which is 5 reserved IP addresses out there.
Okay. How many subnets we can create in one virtual network?
Depends upon the space or the size of the virtual network that you have. It completely depends upon the size of the virtual network that you have provisioned out there. So there is no
Okay.
minimum number, no maximum number. It just depends upon how big it is and what are the sizes of your subnet. If I go with 3 subnets each, meaning 3 spaces in each subnet each, then I can create many more, let's say, many more, let's say, subnets out there. But if I go for 24, then if I'm creating 256 addresses in one subnet, then I can go for 256, let's say, subnets in one virtual network, which has a space of 10.0.0.0/16.
Okay.
Yes, any more questions here?
One question regarding the classes. I mean, if I mean, main virtual network is class A,
Hmm.
so why are we trying to use class C? I mean, does not create any confusion, or like, I mean, the number of addresses won't change, right? Even if you're
The
switching
number of
classes.
addresses won't change. Even if you change the class, the number of addresses won't change.
Yeah.
It's just like using multiple classes in the same. It does create conflict. It does
Yeah.
definitely create conflict out here. That's the reason 99% of the times we don't go ahead and add one more address space out here. We
Mm-hmm.
stick to one particular class of addresses out here so that you don't conflict with, let's say, the routing pattern of Microsoft. There is something called routing patterns and all that stuff. If you don't want to conflict with that, that's where you, this best suggestion of Microsoft is that use one class and please use
Hmm.
subnets of the same class out here as such.
Okay.
Yes, any more questions here? Now, very importantly, if you want to integrate a storage account with a particular subnet, for example, right now, my storage account is integrated with something called what? A demo VNet and subnet 1 out here. If I want to say add an existing virtual network, I can again take the same virtual network out here, which is demo VNet, and subnet 1 is already taken. So I cannot go ahead and let's say add this out. No, doesn't make a really early, great point out here. If I say subnet 2, if I want even subnet 2 to let's say have access to this particular storage account, do you see something called as what? Service endpoint required out here. Where does this concept really come? What is service endpoint out here? Let's look at that. If you go into a virtual network, if I go into, let's say, a virtual network out here, and if I go into a subnet out here, and if I go into something called what, subnet 2, there is something called what, service endpoint. And if I click on the services, it says Azure, let's say Active Directory, Cosmos, it says a lot of things. It also says what, storage. This has to be enabled if you want to integrate a storage account with this particular, let's say, resource out here. What is the logic behind it? Why exactly Azure forces you, or why exactly Azure asks you to go ahead and integrate this particular service endpoint out here? What is the concept of service endpoint out here? Is very simple. Let's go there. Let's say learn more, and it's saying virtual network service endpoints. And now it's telling virtual network service endpoint provides a secure and direct connectivity to your Azure services over an optimized route on the Azure backbone network. What exactly is this? Let's analyze that out. See, when I, as a user, I'm trying to interact with this particular storage account, there are primarily two things out here. I am I am interacting with my own IP address called 49 something like this, right? I am trying to establish a connection with something called as what, a storage account, and even a storage account will have its own IP address out there, its own IP address. And if you want to look at a storage account IP address, for example, I'll just go here, take my storage account, and under the properties of my storage account or endpoints of the storage account out here, there is something called this particular blob endpoint. If I take this out here and if I go into the internet, displays this here, or if I just use a PowerShell and just type in a simple command called resolve-DNS name, and if I give that particular name, do you see the storage account also has its own IP address? So the communication between two things, meaning my IP address and the storage account out here, which is sitting at 20.x.x.x, we call this as a handshake between two different IP addresses out here, meaning one IP trying to talk to another IP address, which is 49 and then 20 out here. So one IP address trying to talk to another IP address over the public internet. Over something known as a public internet out here. Using the same internet, I'm trying to talk to this particular storage account out here. But there is an issue with this. The issue with this model is that if I am a user, I'm trying to talk to the storage account, I'm using this particular internet to talk to the same thing. Internet is nothing but a set of cables that are laid down across the world through which your data is transmitted between different resources. If you are a user and you are not using Azure, you don't even know what Azure really is. You're just sending out an email. You'll be using the same internet to send out the email. You are another customer of Azure, or you are a customer of AWS, and you are talking to, let's say, your S3 bucket service in AWS. You'll be using the same internet out here. If I am doing that, the amount of bandwidth that I can get on the internet is too low. So all the traffic that is going from your computer to that particular storage account is very slow, meaning there will be a lot of latency in getting the data. That is A. B is that the security of this is that if you are sending an email, I'm, let's say, communicating with the same, let's say, cables out here, there is a chance that someone can come here in the middle, look at my data, which in a very technical term is called hacking, meaning I'm prone to get hacked. I can, let's say, go into the, I mean, someone like a hacker can go into that particular internet cable, take out my traffic and look at my data, meaning all the data that you have for your customers and all these things can be looked into if this is the model out here. What Microsoft tells you is that instead of using the cables that are laid down in the internet, meaning internet has a lot of cables out here. In the same way, we have something called Microsoft data centers, meaning there are different data centers across the world. And Microsoft, to connect these data centers, have laid down their own cables, underwater, undersea, a lot of cables out here. Microsoft is telling, instead of using the internet, why don't you use my own cables, which is called as an Azure backbone. This you can also call it an intranet, not an internet, an intranet. Cables laid down for you or for only the customers of Microsoft out here. Can you use this so that you can communicate storage account? If yes, you want to use it, that's where you will need to enable something known as a service endpoint out here inside your subnet. And if you go inside the subnet out here, there's something called as what? Services, and inside which I enable a service endpoint for a storage account. Meaning, whenever you talk to a storage account, don't use the internet, rather use the internet, is what I'm now telling my storage account out here, or rather something that I'm telling to my traffic out here. And this is what service endpoint really means. And if you want to integrate a virtual network with a subnet or with a storage account, you will for sure need something called as a service endpoint out here. So if I now say add an existing virtual network, I'll select this particular virtual network. And now do you see service endpoint is, let's say, already added. So in the bracket, it doesn't tell service endpoint is required. I'll say add this out here. So if you look at this particular concept, now if you see, this telling provides a secure and direct connectivity to your Azure services like storage over an optimized route over what? The Azure backbone network. So it's telling endpoints allow you to, let's say, secure your critical resources to only your virtual network, enables private IP addresses and a lot of things out here. And as of now, these are the available service endpoints like storages like SQL databases, synaptic analysis, synapse analytics, and a lot of things out here. A lot of things support a lot of resources in Azure, support something known as service endpoints out here. Yes, any questions that I can take till here? Anyone, any questions that I can take till here?
Can you show how to add a
Anyone,
service
anything?
endpoint again?
Sure, definitely. So if you want to add a service endpoint, you'll have to go inside the virtual network. And once inside the virtual network, service endpoints can be added for a particular subnet, per a particular subnet out here. So if you go inside a subnet, for example, let's say subnet 3, in which the service endpoint is not there already, I'll just scroll down. There's something called service endpoints. And I will go ahead and select a service endpoint called Microsoft Storage. And I'll say save this out. This is how I add a service endpoint out here.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, any questions still here? Anyone, any questions still here? Okay, please. Mhm. Yes, you can give others also that are supported out here. So if you go inside subnet 2, as of now, I only have one particular resource called what? But I can as well go ahead and give endpoints to, let's say, something like Key Vault, SQL servers, a lot of things out here. So if you go scroll down, I have these resources. I can select all the resources. I can save them out too. I can give 10 different resources as service endpoints out here per a particular subnet. Yes. Anyone, any more questions here? All right. So in tomorrow's session, we'll begin and see how do you create all these things using an ARM template through the automation. And then we'll move into something called virtual machines and all these things out here. So the next coming, let's say 1 week to 10 days is completely going to be on networking. A lot of networking is going to come your way. So any class that you do not understand, please let me know. I'll try to re-explain the same thing out here. These concepts are a little complex. So please let me know. And these concepts are very important for you to, let's say, survive in a cloud field. networking is, let's say, a backbone of any cloud provider as such. So please let me know if you have any questions. I'll be more than happy to explain the same thing out. Okay. Thanks guys, and have a good day ahead. Thank you.